Hi, I'm Doug Ballinger. I'm Logan's dad, and this is another episode of Logan's Voice. If I had 5 minutes with a lawmaker, just 5 minutes, I wouldn't spend that time with statistics. I wouldn't waste it with rehearsed talking points or pie charts. No, I'd bring a photo of my son and I'd start by telling them what it feels like to wake up every day knowing your child is gone and no one ever investigated why. I'd ask them, would you be okay with that if it was your child? Because when someone is gunned down in the street, it's a crime. When someone is poisoned by a counterfeit pill or unknowingly ingests fentanyl, it's called an accident. The difference? One gets yellow tape, the other one gets judgment. My son was poisoned. He didn't overdose on a known dose of known substance. He wasn't trying to die. He was trying to manage pain or escape shame or survive the way too many of our kids do these days by self-medicating in a world that offers very few safe places to land. And yet, there was no knock on the door, no detective calling with updates, no investigation, just silence, just blame. So if I had 5 minutes with a lawmaker, I'd tell them this: we cannot fix what we refuse to confront. And as long as overdose deaths and fentanyl poisonings are treated like personal failures instead of public threats, this epidemic will continue to grow unchecked. This is not about punishing people who are struggling with addiction. It's about tracking down the source of poison that is killing more Americans than any way, any virus, any headline. Logan deserved better. And so do thousands of other sons and daughters, mothers, fathers, aunts, uncles who never made it home. Because at the very least, every life deserves the dignity of an answer. If I had 5 minutes with a lawmaker, I wouldn't start with policy. I'd start with Logan. Let me tell you about my son. Not just how he died, but how he lived. Logan was curious from the moment he could talk. He had this way of lighting up a room, sometimes with laughter, sometimes with questions that were too big for his age. He was a collector of things: stories, music, teapots for his mom, old depression glass with me. He loved motorcycles and thunderstorms, flea markets, and fishing with Granddaddy. He was sharp, funny, and sometimes infuriatingly stubborn. He wasn't perfect, none of us are, but he was real. And he was loved fiercely. Logan also struggled. He was diagnosed with ADHD as a kid, and like so many, his journey with medication began early. We didn't know what we didn't know then. That sometimes what starts as treatment becomes identity, that pills can become patterns, that when the world feels too loud, too painful, or too much, some kids find relief in the wrong things. But Logan wasn't some faceless statistic or broken soul beyond repair. He was trying. He fell. He got back up. He loved his family. He wanted to get better. He was getting better. Until one day, he wasn't. The substance that took my son wasn't what he thought it was. He wasn't looking to die. He was poisoned. And yet, when I tell people that, I can see the wall go up in their eyes. The assumptions click into place. That's why I say his name. That's why I tell his story. Because every time someone hears overdose, they picture a junkie in an alley. I want them to picture Logan, a son, a friend, a nephew, a grandson. He should have been 37. Instead, I'm sitting here telling his story to a world that too often shrugs and moves on. So if I had 5 minutes with a lawmaker, I'd bring Logan into the room because I need them to see what I see when I close my eyes. Not a number, not a case file, my son, Logan. If I had 5 minutes with a lawmaker, after I told them about Logan, I'd pause. I'd look them in the eye and say, you have the power to change this. The question is, do you have the courage? Because make no mistake, every choice you make behind that desk, every policy you write, every dollar you fund or don't fund, someone is living or dying by it. You don't need another committee. You don't need another awareness ribbon. You need to act. You have the power to make fentanyl test strips and Narcan free, legal, and accessible. They're tools. They save lives. This isn't controversial. It's common sense. You have the power to support Good Samaritan laws that protect people who call 911. People are dying because they're afraid to call for help. That's a failure of trust, and it's fixable. You have the power to treat fentanyl poisoning as the public safety emergency it is. The DEA calls it the single deadliest threat we face, and yet so many states, there's no infrastructure to respond. You have the power to fund medical health care that reaches people before they hit rock bottom. We keep talking about stopping the supply. What about the demand? You stop that by healing pain, not criminalizing it. You have the power to fund recovery programs that actually work, not just temporary Band-Aids that look good in a press release. You can give counties the resources they need to investigate drug poisonings with the same seriousness as any other homicide. You can educate our youth about what's out there, not in a one-time school assembly, but with real, honest, ongoing conversations. And if you think this issue doesn't touch your district, think again. This isn't an inner city problem. It's not a party drug problem. It's a nationwide crisis. Rural, urban, rich, poor, black, white, conservative, and liberal. Fentanyl doesn't care who you are, but you should. Because the only thing worse than a deadly epidemic is an ignored one. So yes, you have the power to listen, to act, to lead. But time is not on our side. While you're watching for more politically convenient moment to do something, people are dying. Logan didn't get a second chance. How many others won't? Because you were too slow, too afraid, or too indifferent to use the power you have. If I had 5 minutes with a lawmaker, after I reminded them of the power they hold, I'd ask them this. Why are you ignoring us? Why are grieving parents treated like a nuisance, a political risk, or a PR liability? Why are we invited to awareness events, handed candles, and then shut out of the rooms where the decisions are made? Do you not see us? Or are we just too inconvenient to acknowledge? Because here's what you need to understand. We are not fringe voices. We are a growing movement. Mothers, fathers, siblings, friends, aunts, uncles, who have buried the people you keep saying you want to save, and we are done being quiet. We show up at capitals holding posters with our children's faces. We write their names in chalk on courthouse steps. We carry ashes in necklaces and their memories in our hearts. And still, you act like this isn't your problem. Let me make it plain. If someone dies from fentanyl poisoning in your state and there's no investigation, no warning to others, and no policy change, no call to action, then that death is on your conscience too. We're not asking for pity. We're demanding accountability because this isn't a tragedy. It's a policy failure over and over again. Why is it that overdose deaths don't trigger a homicide investigation? Why is it that overdose deaths don't trigger community alerts like other health issues? Why is there no statewide plan in most places to address fentanyl poisoning like the emergency it is? Why is it that the people who lose someone are the same ones expected to carry the weight, raise the money, fight the laws, and comfort each other while you pass us in the hallway? Stop ignoring us. we are not going away. And we are not asking for the impossible. We're asking for what any parent would want, for our child's life to mean something, for their death to matter, for their story to change someone else's fate. And if you're uncomfortable with that, good. You should be uncomfortable because the comfort you enjoy is paid for with our pain. So no, we will not stop. Not until every overdose is treated like a potential crime it is. Not until every parent gets answers instead of shrugs. Not until stigma is replaced with truth and silence with action. You don't have to agree with everything we say, but you will hear us because we are the voice of the ones you didn't save in time. The truth is, 5 minutes with a lawmaker wouldn't be enough time. Because how do you compress a lifetime of love, a tidal wave of grief, and the weight of an entire national crisis into 5 minutes? How do you explain what it's like to stand over your child's casket knowing that no one's going to jail, no one's investigating, and no one in power seems to care? How do you describe the rage that comes from knowing your child's death could have been prevented, but the system failed them at every step? How do you talk about stigma when it's soaked into policies, the headlines, the sideways looks, and the dismissals you get even after your child is gone? 5 minutes doesn't even scratch the surface. Because here's what 5 minutes wouldn't show them: the missed birthdays, the unopened Christmas gifts, the late night panic attacks that come out of nowhere, the empty bedroom you still can't bring yourself to clean out, the way your heart stops every time you hear sirens, the guilt, the blame, the never-ending what ifs. No, 5 minutes isn't enough. It's not enough time to explain the trauma of finding out your child is dead by phone, by a police knock, or worse, by silence. It's not enough to describe what it feels like to watch other families go through the same thing you did and know the warnings are still being ignored. And it's definitely not enough to undo decades of bad policy, broken systems, and leadership that turns a blind eye to the real cost of this crisis. So no, 5 minutes isn't enough. But it's what we get most of the time: a quick meeting, a polite nod, a thank you for sharing your story, and then nothing. But here's what I've learned. If 5 minutes is all I get, I'm going to make those 5 minutes echo. I'm going to make them unforgettable. I'm going to bring Logan into that room with me and every other child who should still be here. Because if I only get 5 minutes, then I'm going to use it like a battering ram. And when those 5 minutes are over, I'll keep going because I don't get to stop grieving so that they don't get to stop hearing me. If you've made it this far, thank you. You've just walked through what it feels like to lose a child, not just to fentanyl, but to silence, to stigma, to a system that too often sees our kids as disposable. If I had 5 minutes with a lawmaker, I'd use every second. But the truth is, 5 minutes will never be enough because we are fighting against decades of shame, miseducation, and neglect. But I keep showing up because Logan didn't get a second chance, because too many families are still in the dark. Because while they sit in rooms of power debating, we're out here burying our children. Here's what I want you to remember. Every overdose death deserves an investigation. Let me repeat that. Every overdose death deserves an investigation. Every grieving parent deserves to be heard. Every lawmaker needs to understand this crisis isn't theoretical, it's personal. If you're listening today and you've lost someone, this is your voice too. If you're a parent who's scared, confused, or unsure how to help your child, don't wait. If you're in recovery or fighting to get there, you matter. We see you. Keep going. And if you're in power, if you hold a pen, a vote, or a platform, and you're not using it to save lives, then you're part of the problem, period. But there's still time to change that. There's still time to turn 5 minutes of listening into action. I created Logan's voice so my son's story wouldn't end with a death certificate. So when the world says just another overdose, we can say, no, that was Logan, and his life mattered. Because we don't need more moments of silence. We need a movement of voices, loud, unapologetic, and relentless. So here's something you can do to help. Share this episode of Logan's Voice far and wide. Send links to your congressmen, to your mayors, to your city councils, to your county officials. It seems to me that if more of these deaths were investigated as homicides, that it would lead to more convictions and taking the drug chain and cartels down. If this episode helped you understand, then please visit logansvoice.com. There are links to more episodes of my podcast. There's links to Logan's swag shop where you can get shirts and cups that have the message on them that help start the conversation. And get involved in community efforts. Hope Movement Coalition at hopemovementcoalition.com is a group of warrior parents and family members and friends that have an ever-growing voice singing out in this dark abyss to raise awareness about this crisis. I am Logan's voice. I am Logan's dad, and I will not be silent.